Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Porter, a member of the Ocean Hills Country Club CERT team. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. Today is the first day of a quarterly series of presentations brought to you by the Surf Safety Team. I would like to ask that all CERT members stand right now and be recognized. At the end of the presentation, if you would like more information about CERT, please see the back table. It'll give you more information about our organization and applications to get involved. As this presentation is all about your safety, we will start by pointing out the emergency exits. You will note that there's emergency exits at the back of the room and on the side. In case of an emergency and per instructions, if you were instructed to leave, please leave through those exits immediately. Thank you. Today's presentation, Are You Ready?, is about all you need to know about being prepared for a natural disaster. We have two guest speakers that I will introduce shortly. After each presentation, after the presentations, we will open the floor microphones for your questions. Please hold all of your questions till the Q&A session. The first speaker will be Rick Robinson, the Fire Chief of Oceanside. Rick has been in public service for over 40 years. He oversees the third largest fire department in San Diego County, and it's a real pleasure to have him here today. Our other speaker is Rick Adam, excuse me. Cabacunyon. I know. With Be Ready, Inc. There'll be a test later on his name, by the way. Adam. Adam has been here in North County since 1991. He provides a real service to the community, and he will talk to us about supplies we would need in case of a natural disaster. And with that, we're going to open the presentation to Chief Robinson to give us his information about disasters in our area. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. He didn't tell you how to fasten your safety belt, though, did he? Exit, oh, no, wrong thing. How's everybody today? Good. My name is Rick Robinson, and I am the fire chief here, and it's a pleasure for me to, if I look like I'm trying to get close to this thing, I was told, speak an inch away. Am I an inch away? I don't know. So I planned a big, long speech. As a matter of fact, when I got to page 6, I said, wait a minute, I'm going to talk to a bunch of my neighbors. So, and we are neighbors because I've lived in this city for 30 years. Now I just happen to live on the other side of the freeway from you, but we're still neighbors. And so I kind of want to talk to you today, or start our talk off in that way a little bit, and we'll talk about the fire department, and we'll talk about some of the disasters. And by the way, I have brought with me a real expert on public education and speaking, Linda McLaughlin. I should have introduced her when I first got up here. She is our, many of you know her. She is our pub ed specialist in the fire department. She's also a CERT member and a ham radio operator, and she's got a longer pedigree than I do. So she can talk a little more about herself later, but she's here to help me answer the questions that you might have that I don't have answers to. But seriously, I was thinking about what it is we want to talk about today and what can I tell you. And so first of all, believe it or not, I'm one of the newer members to the Oceanside Fire Department. I've really only been there for about 3 years. Became the fire chief in 2016. I failed at retirement. I worked for 36 years in Orange County for Orange County Fire and tried to retire in 2013. And unlike, it looks like most of you were successful at retirement, many of you, I failed. I went back, I had an opportunity of a lifetime, and that is to become the fire chief for the city of Oceanside where we live. And we're, like I said, my wife and I have lived here for 30 years. Raised our 4 kids here in the city, all thankfully married and have kids or working on kids of their own, whatever they do. So they're all out of the house. So I'm starting to enjoy that a little bit. So maybe the next shot at retirement will be a little easier. But I thought I'd just start off first and see what do we know about our fire department. How many of you have ever been to a fire station for a visit or a tour? Or Oh, good, a few of you. How many of you have ever had to call 911 and have them come out to your house? A few of you. Okay, well, hopefully all things worked out well and everybody's fine. Yeah, so in the city of Oceanside, we have 8 fire stations. Everybody knows where their closest one is, right? But I bet you one of the things you're thinking, somebody out there's thinking, well, wait a minute, I've seen those guys from Carlsbad in here, or I've seen those guys from Vista in here, right? Who's thinking that? Yeah, I knew that. That's because over the years, we have developed a process through mutual aid, or now we call it automatic aid agreements, where we have boundary drops. And with our computer-aided dispatch systems and all those technical things that I have no idea how they all work, but we can identify where the closest unit is to the emergency. And so that is why you see other cities come in here when you call for help and you're expecting Oceanside Fire to come in here, because we may not be at that time the closest unit. And so we have agreements with all our neighbors across San Diego County and across the state, actually, for mutual aid and automatic aid. Now, that becomes very important when we talk about disasters, and I'll get into that a little bit later, about how that helps us with disasters and preparedness. But yeah, so we run, in the city of Oceanside alone, anybody have a guess as to how many incidents we run a year? How many do you think? We're right at almost on track to get to 20 to 21,000 incidents this year. That's a lot. We have 8 fire stations. Out of every one of those fire stations has either a fire engine or a fire truck. The difference between a fire truck is it is the big thing with the ladders on it. A fire engine's the smaller one, and it has water and hose on it. So if you ever wondered about that. Then we have 5 ambulances. So I don't have an ambulance at every fire station, only at 5 of our fire stations. Every day we have 35 operationally ready firefighters on duty out of all those. And that's including the battalion chief, and that the battalion chief is the on-duty daily manager of the operations units, that what we call our firefighters that are out there on the front line. So 35, that's not a lot, really. We had more in previous years. Might remember a little thing that happened like in 2008 or something like that. All the budgets got tighter and we had to reduce some staffing and things like that. So we're still trying to catch up from that. And we're making some progress, and we'll be doing some things. We've got a fire academy going right now with, we have 7 firefighter recruits in there, so that'll help us fill some holes that we have. We've had a number of vacancies. So we have 8 fire stations, 35 firefighters every day, on track to run about 20,000 calls, maybe a few more this year. About 80% of those are EMS or medical. When we say EMS, emergency medical services or medical aids. The rest are fire calls, we're what we call an all-risk fire department, and that's a pretty common term now. We no longer just do fires and medical. We do hazmat, we do confined space rescue, we do any number of things that come up. Swiftwater rescue, any of those kind of things we will respond to. Traffic collisions. So our folks have to be trained in a very broad spectrum of emergency response, which includes large-scale disaster response, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. What I should mention before I go too far, the other thing that we have in the Oceanside, part of the Oceanside Fire Department, and sometimes I tend to mention them, is our lifeguards. A few years ago, the Oceanside City Lifeguard Service came under the fire department, and they're a very valuable asset, and a lot of times I call them the unsung heroes of the fire department or of our emergency EMS. Everybody kind of thinks they got that cool job, you know, just getting to hang out on the beach, wear shorts, sit in the tower, go in the water, that kind of stuff. But day in and day out, those individuals, and we have 7 full-time lifeguards, We have 85 seasonal lifeguards that work in the busy seasons in the summer months and things like that. So when you go down to the beach, you might, during the winter months, you might see towers that are closed, and that's just because we don't staff them. But they do a lot of amazing work, and I don't always give them the credit that I should. So when you see a lifeguard, tell them the chief talked about them, which is great. That'll do me a lot of good with them later. So we have a lot of positive things going for our fire department, and we work very closely with our neighbors. A lot of the young firefighters that I talk to don't believe this, but when I started in the fire service, we actually had cities that would stop at their city boundary and not respond past their city boundary. So they could see a house burning, and they would stop at the city boundary, because back then in the 70s, we didn't have automatic aid agreements. We didn't have mutual aid agreements. We didn't have the things that we have in play today that make us better, that allow us to serve you better. So don't get all distressed when you see Vista or Carlsbad come in here. It's not that we're not doing our job. It's probably we're in another part of town on the east side or out in the valley. We might be responding to parts of their cities and their communities in return. So it all balances out. We don't really, we keep track of how much service we provide, but generally it all balances out over the course of the year. We also have Camp Pendleton next to us, which is a great resource. They have their federal fire department, fully trained. We sometimes get our hazardous materials response unit out of there. They also leave the base. They come and help us in our emergencies, our day-to-day emergencies, and we go help them when they have things on the base. So we have a very, very robust network of emergency responders. So I make it sound pretty cool, and we're all covered, right? Day in and day out, beautiful days like this that we try not to tell our people that are back there in the snow in Pennsylvania or wherever that, we don't tell them we have days like this, right? We're well covered, well managed. But what are we here to talk about? Is not those day-to-day things. It's what happens in those emergencies, those real, when we say an emergency scenario or a disaster scenario. Now, everybody has their own personal what's an emergency, right? To some, our cat up in the tree, that's an emergency. And yes, I'll go get your cat out of the tree. They'll come down, but if I don't want you going to get it, I'll go get it. It might be, maybe it's a heart attack or a medical condition that we have, or the fact that we've locked, not that I would know anything about this, locked the grandchild in the car with the car running and the keys in the car. We'll come out and help. It could happen, I've heard. So those kind of things. We all have these day-to-day emergencies. But what we're really here to talk about today is those large-scale disasters, if you will. And how do you respond to those? And there's a number of them. We can have a number of things. What do you think? Well, how many's lived in California their whole life? Or a long time? How many live? Okay. What's the one thing we're known for out here that your friends and family back in the Midwest say they'll never move to California because of earthquakes? I would rather live in earthquake country than I would where there's tornadoes. Isn't it weird? We're all different. I don't want to live where there's hurricanes. I don't want to live where there's tornadoes. I'll ride through. I've been through a bunch of earthquakes, just like many of you have. And yeah, they're a little bit scary, but for the most part, we do pretty well. Every once in a while, there are those really big ones. And some of you may remember those. And actually, the whole CERT program that we're going to talk about a little bit kind of got its kickstart from a big earthquake, right? Who knows which one? Where? The LA, right? Sylmar. That kind of was the trigger for the CERT program out of LA. That whole program, that curriculum, everything kind of got developed, and then it's just moved along very smartly. It's probably one of the best things to ever come out of a tragic disaster, loss of life disaster. So we're here to talk a little bit about those type of things and why I think, personally, we're very well prepared here in Oceanside, and especially this community. This community, the way you're structured and the way you're cert, and when you see your folks that are wearing cert, okay, be careful how I say that, cert shirts, try saying that 3 times real fast. Thank them, because they do put a lot of work in and a lot of training. Yeah. They do put a lot of work in, a lot of effort, and a lot of training. So let me just talk for a minute about just CERT and my experience with it. I became first familiar with the CERT program when I was working in Orange County in a city, the city called Placentia, wanted to start a CERT program. I hadn't really heard much about it. I just knew the name. And I was in a position that I was asked to go help them start it up. So I got to research it and become an instructor and go help them get started. And it has just really become a passion of mine to be involved with it. It was amazing what those folks jumped into and the training they did. And so I've been very lucky over the years to stay involved with it. And then when I retired, it was kind of like, I'd be honest with you, as long as I've lived here in the city, when you work outside the city, it's kind of weird what you don't know about where you live. And I didn't know that we had a CERT program here. And so when I finally got back involved with the fire department, I was very excited to see that we had a CERT program. So we've all lived through those earthquakes, or we sit in anticipation of our first one if you haven't had one. And they will happen, and everybody talks about the big one that's coming, and that if you live in the valley, you'll have oceanfront property, or that's why I'm waiting for that. I'm staying out there. I'm just kidding. They find new faults. They can be scary. They can be very scary. And they can be, as I make a little bit light of it, they can be very damaging and they can be very tragic, where we've had loss of life. What's the other big type of disaster do we worry about here in California? Fires, wildland fires. Anybody here been impacted by a wildland fire? Maybe recently? Yeah. So, yes, wildland fires. If you've lived in California for any length of time, you have been either impacted or experienced through wildland fires. And that's just part of living here in a wildland-urban interface area. When you build your homes into the wildland, when we recreate in the forests, in the deserts, we are going to be impacted by wildland fires. So so I would say those are the 2 big ones for us. Now, earthquakes also can cause other things. The side effect to that for us could be a what? A tsunami, right? So we are a tsunami. If you ever drove, if you ever, I got to get my grammar right. There's got to be a teacher out there that's taking notes. If you've ever been downtown Oceanside, you've probably seen evacuation routes for tsunami. You've seen the sign that we're a tsunami-ready city. And we have spent a lot of time and effort preparing for a tsunami, which generally would be as a result of an earthquake somewhere. It might not be our earthquake. It might be somebody else's earthquake. But it is a potential. We've had small episodes, I've been told. I've never personally seen it, but I've been told over the years that we have had small tsunami-like episodes where it's impacted our harbor and things like that. But we have evacuation routes. We've done all the things that we need to do to be that tsunami-ready city. So those side effects to the earthquake plus wildland fires, I would say, are the biggest things that we need to worry about here. Now, and we can talk about any other kind of natural disaster that you want to talk about when we do our Q&A. So if you have a specific question about natural disasters or how to respond, I'll give you my best guess on some of them, but on this one, I'm going to talk primarily about these 2 things. So the key thing about earthquakes for us when we deal with it is, and one of the things that we train our firefighters to do is to, when we have an earthquake, no matter what the severity is, certain things that we go through, certain processes that we go through to ensure that, one, we're safe, our equipment's safe, and all those kind of things. Once that's done, we go out and survey our communities. We go out and look for things. One of the great things about this community is, believe it or not, it's not one that we have to really worry about too much. And why is that, do you think? Because of your cert, you're in a nice confined area. You have your cert team that can go, they have a plan for going around checking on you, making sure who needs help, who needs assistance. And again, we do this process called triage in this, just like in a medical emergency. We sort out who needs help. So depending on the time of day, depending on the day of the week, depending on the different locations and buildings may develop a higher priority. So if it was during the middle of the day on a Tuesday or Wednesday and school was in session, what might be our higher priority? Schools, getting out to the schools, getting out to those higher occupancy locations where there's vulnerable populations such as schools. Our hospitals, checking out the hospitals, our medical facilities, where we have a lot of people that tend to congregate, things like that. We will get here eventually, depending on the type of damage. And all of our fire departments operate generally on the same plan. We have a county-wide plan. We all work the same. So if, again, you might see a Vista fire engine or a Carlsbad fire engine come through and drive through, but they're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be doing the same thing that we're doing. They're looking to see where the damage is. And they may or may not be able to stop and help. So depending on the severity of that type of earthquake and how big it is and what damage, they may take action, or they may just record what's going on and go to the next location that they have in their survey area. Because the goal is always to do the most good for the greatest number of people. And that's just a principle that we operate off on. So the great thing about us here is when we come up here and you have your CERT volunteers and in their teams, they've already, in very short order, they will go around and they'll assess your community. They'll be able to meet that fire engine or that officer, chief officer, whoever comes around, and give them a report that, hey, things are good. This is, these are our needs. This is where people might be trapped. This is what the infrastructure looks like. This is, or that everything's good and you can go apply your resources somewhere else. Now I talked a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to watch because I'll keep talking. So you grab the hook when you need to. Okay? So when I talked about the mutual aid program, the statewide mutual aid program, so depending on the size of the emergency, we first draw from our local neighbors, which is in our zone here, like Carlsbad, Vista, San Marcos, Escondido. And then if we need other resources, we can go all throughout all of San Diego County. We can go to another county. And if it's bad enough, we will bring resources in from Northern California. We've brought them in from out of state, from Arizona, Nevada. It just depends on the amount of damage and what those resources are. Just like we send folks when you see a hurricane. We sent resources from California to Florida. We sent them to Hawaii, believe it or not. Right, and the storm didn't do a lot of damage. You know, they sent back this nice photo of them standing on the beach in Oahu, and it was like, great. But no, we send our resources all over the world, actually, if requested. And so we can get those same resources here to San Diego County and to Oceanside when we need them. So having enough resources for the big disaster is, I won't say it's problematic. It takes a little time to get those resources stood up and delivered and brought in, but we will get them. We will get them. We have a very, very robust and tested mutual aid system here in the state of California. We actually are the ones that kind of started it for the nation. We kind of started that system here in California. We were the first ones to have a incident command system and a lot of things. So kind of trailblazers a little bit, but now the federal government has picked up on it several years ago and refined the things that we did, and now we all kind of operate on a national level. So earthquakes, again, and you're going to get a little bit of description as to what you might need in an earthquake, what equipment, and I'm not going to get into that too much other than it's really up to you to be prepared. I can't be here for you. I'm just going to tell you, as neighbor to neighbor, I can't be here for you every day if we have a major emergency. You will have to be ready to be prepared to take care of yourself for a few days. Now, we will do everything we can to get here as soon as we can and to do everything we can as fast as we can. But you need to be ready to take care of yourself and your family for a few days, 3-4 days. At least plan on that. And if you never use it, I can't tell you how many emergency supplies my wife and I have thrown out over the years, because we'll buy stuff and then it goes bad, or we cycle through it or use it and get new stuff. So, but that's a good thing, because we've never had to use our emergency supply kit. Let me talk just briefly about, and Linda here, she can talk a little bit more about certain stuff when we have our Q&A, and we'll do it right from here. She can jump in. I told her she can jump in anytime she wants to. But let me talk a little bit about wildland fires, because we see those more often and they're more. So the same resources that we talk about for earthquakes and other disasters, we use almost on an annual basis for wildland fires. And I know one of the big concerns here is about communication and evacuation, and I know that was a real problem during the Lilac fire. There's a number of reasons, and I could go through all those, and maybe with the question and answer we'll have time to go through all those reasons why the alerts went out the way they did. That was a learning lesson for the state and for the county and for us locally. But wildland fires are just a matter of fact. We're going to see them. We have them just about every year somewhere. So far, we haven't had anything too big here in our area this year. Northern California, as you saw, they just got inundated the last couple of years. They've been getting just clobbered. And, but we've had our share of fires here in San Diego County, right? The one really, again, great thing about this community is it's so well maintained. The things that are fire hazards don't generally exist here because of the maintenance that you do. You don't have the separate, you have great separation from the wildland interface. So again, this isn't one of those communities that you have great fire, you have your golf course, you have your green belts, you have all those things that we want, you have already. So is there some risk for all our communities in Oceanside? Sure, there is some potential risk. But I just want you to know that you live in a very, very well planned out, and from what I see when I drive around, and once in a while I go to our neighborhoods and I drive around. This is one I've been through and driven through, and it's well maintained, and there's a lot of positive things for this community, especially when faced with a disaster. So when we have these large wildland fires, what happens is we enter into what we call a unified command using the incident command system. I don't want to bore you with all that, but what that means is all the different agencies that are going to be impacted. So when the Lilac fire happened, we had CAL FIRE, we had Oceanside, we had North County Fire Protection District, which is Fallbrook and Bonsall in that area, and the city of Vista, all at the command post, all making decisions, all talking to each other about what resources can we provide, where do we think the fire is going, what do we think is going to happen, and what areas should we evacuate. And that's a little bit about what happened with the evacuation. Is some of that discussion came out from, I will tell you, I was driving down the 76. I just happened to go out, I don't know why, but the day before the Lilac fire, I had decided to put some of our fire inspectors out doing wildland patrol. I said, I just want you to go out, be visible, get out there in the canyon areas, get out there in the Morro Hills, and drive around. And that day, the lilac fire started. So I was already going out. I was driving out the 76 just to check on my patrols and see how they were doing, and I heard the lilac fire start. So I started to head out there to see what was going on, and all of a sudden the traffic got so bad, and the smoke was coming in, and I could tell that this was developing to be a really big fire really fast, because the first incident commander, the first fire captain on scene, reported about a 2-acre fire. About 3 minutes later, the battalion chief from CAL FIRE got on scene and reported a 30-acre fire taking out homes in the mobile home park. That's how fast that moved. So I was out on the 76, and I could see that I really didn't need to get out there in that mess, so I turned around to come back into Oceanside and check and see what we were doing and where we were sending people. And I'm listening to the radio. I'm listening to and this is about 45 minutes into it, and the incident commander had kind of split the fire boundaries down the 76, and he had a commander on the one side of the highway, you think about it, and then one on the other side, responsible for all the actions that were going on. And I heard him talk to one of his, what we called a branch director at the time, and he said, I want you to division, which means create geographical areas for this fire all the way to the ocean, because I think it's going to go there. So this is a very experienced fire commander that's making this decision. What happened, I think, is that information, his concern, got to the county, and then they started to make some decisions about evacuation over time. And they actually got ahead of us. So I'm not blaming them, because they were doing their job, but we had the Emergency Operations Center open in Oceanside, and some of those decisions were getting made outside, because we don't make the evacuation notices. All those notices come through the county, and we didn't have, and it's I will own it a little bit, we didn't have that communication that we should have with them maybe at the time to say, no, don't evacuate this area, because what they don't realize sitting in San Diego making that decision, they don't realize where our roads go, right? We all sit in kind of a funnel. When we're trying to get to the freeway, it all kind of goes the same way. Well, if you're out there in Morro Hills or where I live by the golf course at Oceanside Municipal, it doesn't matter if you can get to a road or not. All those roads go to the same place. And that's why we had traffic backed up on Douglas like you wouldn't believe. I had friends calling me saying, what should we do? What should we do? And fortunately, I was able to tell them to go back home, because I knew where the fire was. But nonetheless, it caused a lot of panic and a lot of concern. And if that happened here, I want to personally apologize as the fire chief, and I know the police chief would tell you the same thing. That was not our intent. You were never at risk from that fire here. And so those notices that went out and things like that, we have worked with the county. We've made some changes, and hopefully we'll have more control over the future. That's the best that we can do, is learn from our emergency incidents. So, but I say all that to say part of what how do you stay informed? How do you stay notified? How did you get your notifications? How did people tell you there was a problem? Was it just the smoke or on TV? Cell phones, right? County. You got notified through either you have an app or they're connected to your telephone. Yeah, that's a very, very good way. And if you use the computer and you have access, you want to use those go to the city website, to the county websites, and look, and they will update information. It's amazing the information you can get. There's apps or applications that you can have if you have a cell phone, a smartphone, that you can put on there that will alert you as to what's going on. They will give you alerts. It's Alert SD, right, Linda? Is that what it's called? San Diego Alert. Alert San Diego. I knew it. So
they just came automatically on our phones.
Right.
If you have a landline, it will.
No, our cell phone too.
Yeah, some of them are automatically connected to that. But again, if you get that app, Alert San Diego, if you go look at that, there's a ton of information in those that tell you what's going on with the emergency, where the fire's at, what resources are being used. There's a lot of information in there. Now, I get it. A lot of us don't use those kind of phones or don't like getting on the computer and using the internet. That's where our responsibility comes, is to get back and communicate. And because you have a CERT program here, and we've done some changes, and we're gonna get better and train even better than we have. And they have the ham radio systems and all that. They have the ability to communicate directly with our EOC, directly with personnel, once we stand those things up, and communicate with other CERT teams. And so that's why I say you're in a really good place. Matter of fact, if we have another disaster, I'm coming here.
I want to know, there's only 2 exits out of here. How do you plan, or do you have a plan for getting 1,600 homes out of here?
So, got a little bit ahead of our Q&A, but that's okay. So the question was, you have 2 exits out of here, and what is the plan? So, and that's what I'm trying to say, is that in most cases, you're probably better off if you don't need to leave, or you don't have a way to go. Huh?
If it's a fire, if it's a wildfire.
But the point, that's my point, is you're not going to have a wildfire within your community. You're not going to have that type of fire here within the community.
Go on the golf course.
So you don't need to join. I would cautiously, if you feel you need to go, then you go. You're going to be getting with everybody else that's out there. So we'll talk a little bit more about exiting and having a plan and that kind of stuff. But I think you're here because I'm done. Anyway, so those are the 2 big. We'll talk more about it. Let's get somebody up here that can tell you some real information.
Thank you, Chief. And we will get back to Q&A, trust me. One of the things he said, that in case of a disaster and we are told to stay here, stay home, don't evacuate, all of you got a sign when you moved in that said either okay or help. If you don't know where these are, please see us in the back of the room and we'll take your names, because this will really help us. If there's a natural disaster, you put this in your front window, it tells us if you're okay, and we can move on, because we're really looking for this, okay? So if you don't have it, please see us in the back of the room. We'll make sure you get one of these, okay? Again, with Q&A, please hold your questions to the end. Now, Adam, if I could have you come up and talk about some of the supplies that maybe we need to think about having in case we are asked to shelter in place.
Good afternoon. Aloha. All right. First of all, thank you for having me here. This is by far one of the most formal situations I've ever found myself speaking in. I was not prepared to be on TV. I feel a little underdressed for this kind of thing. Before I kind of get into it, number one, I want to say that the Oceanside Fire Department is top-notch. I've dealt with fire departments all over the country for all sorts of different reasons, and Oceanside has always been top-notch. And Linda here is one of the finest pieces of that puzzle. She is a hard worker. She's working for you. Thank you for inviting me to this CERT event. I do have to say that all of you who are here that are forward-thinking about emergency preparedness situations, if you're not in CERT, I don't know what you're doing through your life. You need to get in there. Linda is fantastic. Her and the rest of the people at CERT and with the trainings and everything. I am personally a part of the Oceanside CERT team. They're awesome. You need to get it done. It's one of the best things you can do to prepare yourself for any type of emergency, and it will answer most of your questions about what to do in any of these situations, how to best help not only you, but also your community, your family, all these things. It's wonderful, and I would highly encourage you all to be a part of it. So I'm in a little bit of an interesting situation here today. I was kind of prepared to speak on one thing. Now I'm being asked to a little bit kind of change it to speak on another, but I also had to allow for the fire chief here to give his piece, and then I need to kind of adjust my talk according to that, so I'm not hitting the same topics. So what I'm going to talk about today is generally the type of stuff you need to think about having in an emergency. And I'll give my background. My name's Adam Kabakungan. That's a Hawaiian Filipino last name. I'm the biggest Filipino you'll ever meet. But I'm from a company called Be Ready. Many of you may have seen us. We were on Oceanside Boulevard forever. We've recently moved to San Marcos because we had some, greedy landlord situation. But we're still in the community. It's my family's business, so even though my title is vice president, I do the exact same thing as when I was, 10 years old and cleaning the bathrooms. So I don't claim to be an expert, but I've been in the business long enough to know a little bit about a little bit. So here's my caveat. Everything that I say about what you should have, and there are thousands of lists on the internet or anywhere you want to look that'll tell you this is what you need and you should have this much of this thing and this much of this thing. All of that is a crock of lies. My big thing and my personal pet peeve is that every disaster plan needs to be customized to you. So although there are great rules of thumb in the industry, there is no list on the planet that you can go to and say, this is what I need and I will be set. It just doesn't exist. Because you have your own dietary restrictions, you have your own income, you have your own space allotments, you have your own background in being a nurse or being you have your own backgrounds, being military, whatever it is, you need to customize this to you. So I'm going to give very general kind of rules of thumb, and I only have 15 to 20 minutes to do it, so I'm going to go really quick. But we can talk afterwards at my booth if you have any more specific questions, okay? So, number one, what is the most important thing that you need to plan for in any emergency that you need to have on hand? What is it? Water. Good job. Water. How much water are you supposed to have according to the Red Cross per week per person? I have not heard the right answer. 20 gallons per person per week. Why is that? Because it's not just drinking water. Now, when you're talking about just drinking water, 1 liter is the rule of thumb. A gallon is the best answer. But that's going to be very different on a day like July 30th versus a day like December 30th here, correct? And that's going to be very different from Washington State to Texas, correct? So that's the reason why the Red Cross has the rule of thumb of 20 gallons per person per week, because that's the rule of thumb for everyone in the United States across all situations. What is that for? That's for drinking water, sanitation, first aid, everything that you could use water for. Does everyone here have enough water in their house to last 1 week? Yeah. Does everyone here have enough water to last 2 weeks? No. Does everyone here have enough water to last 1 month? No. If you're a household of 2 and you need to be prepared for 1 month, let's just say that that's what your disaster plan is. Because it could, you personally, you might want to prepare for 3 days, you might want to prepare for a week or a month. Let's just say you have a month. How many gallons of water do you need for 2 people for a month?
160.
160 gallons. Does everyone have that kind of room in their house? No. So, okay, so water is the most important thing. Should you have water on hand? If you need 160 gallons for your household, how are you going to get enough water to last you 1 month? Let's just make that round number of 1 month. How are you going to make it last? How are you going to get enough water?
Fill the bathtub.
Fill the bathtub? Okay.
You
Use the water heater. All those are great answers. Of course, the bathtub, me personally, I've always had an issue with that. Number one, all bathtubs have a slow leak. No matter how good the stopper you have in it, it's got a slow leak, so you're going to be losing a little bit of water. But number two, and most importantly, I don't want to be drinking Adam's soup. Right? Ladies, do you want to be drinking your husband's soup? There are answers to that, but there are ways to get water. There are ways to use the water that's available to you, like filling the bathtub, like using the water heater, as long as the water that's still in your household is still clean enough to drink, because situations can arise, especially with earthquakes, where that's not really the case. The number two thing that you have to have, besides having at least some sort of drinking water in your house, is you have to have a good filter. Now, there are a lot of filters on the market, and I've been in the industry long enough to know that, let's be conservative, 75% of the filters on the market are using crazy words and legal jargon that means that they don't do jack crap. Don't know how you feel about, me getting a little colorful, but I'm just telling you, they don't do what they're claiming to do. So if 75% are just junk, for me, in my mind, there's about 20% that are good for what they claim to do, and you have to be really careful about what kind of filters you're using. Most filters on the market are made for either tap water or hiking, camping, high mountain stream water. Either one of those is good for what it's for, but in an emergency, it's not going to cut it. There's only a couple brands out there that will do what I would like to refer to as urban emergencies, meaning that here in Oceanside, if something were to go down, we're not talking about clean streams running through here. We're talking about streams that have already come through Escondido, San Marcos Vista, to down here, and you don't want to be drinking that water. We're also talking about pools, and there's only a couple of filters on the market that'll do pool water. We're also talking about, in extreme emergencies, street gutter water with all those car chemicals. And we're talking about, in really bad emergencies, septic tanks. These are the type of filters that you are absolutely going to need when something goes down, and you have to be ready and able to get water from places that you normally wouldn't. So once water's taken care of, like I said, I'm going to be blowing through this really fast. Once water's taken care of, what's the next thing we need to worry about? Food? That's what most books and stuff would tell you. In my personal opinion, and this is just preparedness according to Adam, my next step would be a quality 72-hour kit. Now, a 72-hour kit, we call it a 72-hour kit because when my company first got in the industry in '91, what the Red Cross said was, no matter what the emergency is, we can be there to help you within 72 hours. Anyone believe that? It's different now, right? So what a 72-hour kit is now, or what can now be called a go bag, or a get out of Dodge bag, or whatever it is, in my opinion, what that is a kit that you leave in your car. Why in your car? Because 95% of the time, wherever you are, your car is. Work, school, play, church, wherever you're at, your car is usually there. And what the 72-hour kit has now morphed into, from just get me through 72 hours so people can help me, now it's basically a get-home bag. Wherever you are, think of the furthest place you go on a normal basis. Wherever that is, do you have enough stuff in your car to get you from that spot back home to a school location, wherever you and your family and whoever you're trying to get back to, wherever that is, do you have enough supplies to get you back if you had to walk? And that's really what a 72-hour kit is now. So it needs to be lightweight. It needs to be heat resistant, so that in your trunk of your car, in the middle of summer, 150 degrees in there, you're not just going through everything. If it's going to take you more than a day, you need to have some stuff for overnight. Ladies, absolutely have some comfortable walking shoes in there. Guys, if you wear crazy shoes, have some comfortable walking shoes in there too, whatever it is. Plan for, if you need to be broad ranged here. Remember, this could happen the middle of summer, the middle of winter, whatever it is. You need to be able to get back to where you can get help and meet up with the people that you love. Having a quality 72-hour kit is key, in my opinion. Now, after the 72-hour kit, my personal preference is food. So make sure you have enough food. In an emergency, when the power goes out, how much money do most people have invested in their refrigerator freezer at any given time? 0. You got an empty fridge, my friend. I'm a big boy. I got some food in there. Making sure that you have not only enough food, because when the power goes out, most people are going to start using what's in their refrigerator first, but then going to their canned stuff. Making sure that you have enough food to get you through. Once again, this is going to be dependent on you and your preparedness plan. Are you preparing for 3 days, 1 week, 3 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever it is? Make sure that you have the appropriate items to last that long. There's a lot of, I would say, at least on a daily basis, I hear, well, in an emergency, you'll eat whatever you have. Anyone feel that way? You guys are really smart. There are tons of stories out there of people who will just starve to death because they won't eat something that they have that they just don't like. Sounds crazy right now when we have food, right? But the stories are everywhere. After any disaster, there will be someone who died and they'll be like, they had green beans in their house. They just don't eat green beans. I hear all the time from mostly dudes, comes down to it, I'll eat bugs. Great, fellas. Is your wife gonna eat bugs? Is your kids gonna eat bugs? No. I don't care how starving my 2-year-old was, he would not eat a bug. I take that back, he might. My 3-year-old, she would not. So make sure you have the appropriate types of foods in your house. Foods that you know you like, that you can prepare with or without heat. Make sure that it's stuff, especially, I'm just gonna say, you guys are a little more seasoned than I am. Seasoned, that's a good one? Okay. A little more seasoned. Make sure it's stuff, if you have dietary restrictions, high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever it may be, make sure that if you got to eat the same thing every day for a few days, a week, whatever it is, that it's not going to kill you. I have customers very regularly, clearly military men, and I honor and salute them, clearly. Not in the best health. They go, I got all kinds of MREs. You know what's in MREs? You know the salt content in MREs? They are good for what they are made for. Young men who are marching. Getting rid of all that salt. You need your electrolytes, son. If you are not in that frame of mind anymore, that body position anymore, whatever it may be, make sure that whatever you have stored up is appropriate for you. And there are great options out here there. Lastly, what I'm going to say is this. After the Japan tsunamis in particular, the world was enlightened to the need for better emergency preparedness items. And since then, there's been time and time again that new and more modern ways of doing things have come up. If you are still going on the preparedness ideas and philosophies of anything before the year 2000, you are out of date. There are better ways to do things than, and I get this one all the time too. Well, this is how I've done it my whole life. My grandfather did it this way. My grandfather had a rotator phone. And even he's gone up to an iPhone. It's not that the ways that you've done it always are, obsolete. In worst case scenarios, absolutely, but there are better ways to prepare than ever before. better technologies, better all the way around. And I would love to, at some point, talk to you about how to prepare you and your family to get ready and to customize it to what you need. I will be at the booth in the back. I've only brought a few things, but I can talk to you about what your questions are, how to prepare, what kind of products are on the market now that will best help you. And I hope that I get that opportunity to do that. And once again, thank you for allowing me to speak to you today.
Thank you, Adam. One other thing to consider, in an emergency, if we lose power, that electric can opener is not going to do you any good. Okay, just keep that in mind. For now, we're going to open the floor up to Q&A, and what we do is we have 2 microphones in each of the aisles. If you have a question, we ask that you go to the microphone, okay? And then I'll recognize that, and we'll keep it moving. Please form your question as a question. Some of us like to tell stories, which are good, but we really want the questions. So with that, please come up to the microphone, ask your questions.
Well, they're coming up. Can I address the issue of evacuation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. While you're coming up, let me just talk about evacuation. And the question was, what am I going to do about 1,600 homes and 2 exits to get you out of here? The honest answer is, I'm not going to do anything. I can't evacuate that many homes. I don't have the, so the point about evacuation, and I don't mean to sound flip about it, is you have to be ready to evacuate. You have to, and there's 2 kinds of evacuations. There are what we call a voluntary, or we notify you that an evacuation may be necessary. If you're not ready then, you need to take those kind of things seriously and get ready. If you're in an area that is vulnerable to the emergency, you're in the path of it, you need to go. Mandatory evacuations, and by the way, almost all evacuations are handled by law enforcement. It's the law enforcement, the cops are responsible for evacuation and traffic control and those kind of things. And we work in collaboration as to where we should do those, and that's why I said this area on the Lilac Fire got those evacuation notices, I think, inappropriately, and we'll work on making sure we fine-tune that better. What drives evacuation is if it's a wildland fire and you're getting, while you may not get direct flame impingement into this community, you may not have the fire problem, but you would get the drift smoke. If you have respiratory or health issues and that smoke's going to bother you, then you need to leave very early and evacuate. If you don't have those concerns or issues, make sure that you are prepared, but you have to make that ultimate decision as to whether you're going to go or not.
Do the N95 masks, do they really help?
Yes, they can help tremendously, especially filtering out the large particulate matters. She asked about N95 masks. Do they help? Those masks that you see, the white masks look like surgical masks, they do help with the large particulate matter. If you have serious respiratory issues, they probably won't be sufficient. You won't, well, because you're not going to, they get very difficult to breathe in after over a period of time. So you want to change it out, especially if there's a chance it's going to get dirty, and so have several of them. Anyways, that's kind of the truth about evacuation, is you have to know your best route out, you have to be prepared, and go when you feel that you need to go. But just remember, when you leave your community here, you're going out to where everybody else is. And when you go out your gates, there's only a couple ways you can go, right? Everybody else. So either leave early and get ahead of the crowd, or be ready to ride it out and that. So I'll just kind of say that about evacuations.
Okay, question number 1 over here.
Yes, you more or less answered my question, but we're not concerned so much about the fire reaching us as we are about the toxicity of the air. So assuming that the roads are crowded, you can't get out, you don't want to get stuck in a car, your lungs are pretty good. Would it be safe to just stay in the house and to to what extent can
Okay.
the house
Great,
filter?
great question. Did everybody hear that? So if you're going to stay in the house, you turn off your air conditioner, because that tends to just recycle air. You don't want to. So turn off your air conditioner, close your windows. If you have large openings where you can, you can put towels or seal up your doors. It just depends on how bad it's bothering you. But generally, most of our homes in Southern California are built fairly airtight. And, you're going to get uncomfortable. I'd have some fans going in the house to keep the air moving if you have that or whatever. But the big thing is stay inside, shut the air conditioner off, and you should be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Question over here.
Yeah, there are two questions. One is, if you do prepare, where do you, excuse me, where do you store all the material that you've prepared? I have a bunch of material stored. I bought a big trash bin.
Adam probably has some really good solutions that you can buy. And
Well, yeah, but
let me tell you what. I'll just tell you what I do.
Right.
So I have a large 35-gallon trash can, metal trash can, with a lid. That's where I keep the majority of supplies. And I keep it in near a corner of the garage. And the reason is if I have a collapse, odds are the corner's the strongest point, and I'll still be able to get to it. And he's absolutely right about the bag in your car. And I have a big box with stuff in my truck, and my wife has a bag in her car. The other thing I have done is I have to replace it, but for years I had like those truck guys put those toolboxes, those big metal toolboxes in the back of their trucks. Well, I had one of those sitting in the corner of the yard. The bottom kind of rusted out, so I got to replace it. But I had a lot of supplies, and if we evacuated and I had stuff that I couldn't take that was valuable, I put it in that box and would lock it up. And if a fire came through, odds are it's not going to melt it, or if it did, at least I'd be able to find it. So that's one place that you can store stuff in just a locked, secured box. But again, you need to check your supplies on a regular basis and make sure that things are good. And I'm sure the stuff Adam has is a lot better than what I have.
Yeah, that's in fact what happened. We do have it in a large 35-gallon, but we have it outside, and it fries here in the summertime, all of the materials.
In Southern California, is this on? Okay. In Southern California, the most ideal place would be in a shed. That way it's away from your home. If there's a collapse, if there's a fire, it's probably going to be okay. The second most ideal place is in a garage. Third, close by a closet or something near the front of your house. Me personally, I don't like the idea of the trash barrels, especially once again more seasoned here. For this type of community, because if you load that thing up, it's going to be heavy. And to get it out, you're going to have to strain to get it into the car, if your car even is big enough, the back door or whatever, to get it in there. And the other part is, if you need something at the bottom, you got to dump everything out to get to it. I think, and this is generally speaking again, for a community like this, having a large suitcase type of thing with a rolling handle, rolling wheels is the most ideal situation, because it can still be stored compact and somewhere out of the way, but you can roll it with you, and with very limited effort, you can absolutely get that in your car if you needed to leave.
It's hard to get 20 gallons of water in that suitcase.
Absolutely hard to get 20 gallons in that suitcase, but at the time when you're leaving, having water is secondary to you getting out. Yeah.
Okay. Question over here.
My question deals with an earthquake.
Can you get closer to the mic, please?
My question deals with earthquakes. If we have a major earthquake and water is coming out of the pipe in the middle of the street, what do I do?
Coming out of the middle of the street, as far as a water main break.
Yes. Like
Capture as much as you
Is
can.
it affecting your house?
No, not at the moment.
Not at the moment. I'll let the fire department handle that one. that can be more official.
Water, you can use that water in a lot of different ways. You can buy water purifying tablets for any water to, you know, purify it so that you can use that for drinking. You can try to save it in any sort of container that you might have. It's just like when it rains. You guys,
Well,
when it rains, we collect water, don't we? So
We're
that we
talking
can use
about
it
a
for
lot of water.
A lot of water.
A lot of water.
Like the ocean?
Well, I'll tell you what, unless, it's just one of those things that's going to go until somebody has the ability to get up and shut it down. A lot of times
That could be 3 days.
it might be.
And that's okay?
Depends on how big the emergency is and what other
Yeah.
things we're dealing with. It's,
Yeah.
unless you know where the street valve is and you have a street key,
Which you shouldn't.
which you shouldn't, but, you know,
You would just have to let it go. And
Just let it go.
It's the triage system. They're going to take care of the most important things in order.
And this is going to be down on the bottom.
well,
Depends.
remember-
Is there fires burning tens of thousands of houses down and you got one little leak, or
It's not just a little leak.
Well, there's more than the fire department and the police department. So our public works department, their main job is to ensure infrastructure continuity. So who's missing here today is folks from our water department, and we have emergencies. They're out there working just as hard as we are ensuring. So I'm sure if you had a water main leak and it was impacting our ability to deliver water and to provide fire protection, the water department will get out here and shut it off as fast as they can. I guess I'm just responding from a fire chief's perspective.
Right.
My firefighters may not be able to get out here to do it.
And what do you think my chances of getting in touch with the water department are when there's...
But
depends on how
remember,
big the earthquake was.
they monitor those systems. They can tell when those things are happening. They can tell.
In addition to that, don't just necessarily assume that that water is clean drinking water. It takes power to run the filters and the pumps that the cities use. So if you need to use it, absolutely use it, but use precaution when you're trying to collect that water. If there's a major earthquake, there could be breaks in the pipes. They could just be free flowing without having been filtered first. So take precautions before you just collect it and drink it.
Remember I said one of the things we do is we do an area survey. So we'll have people out surveying. We will, if you can't call 911, you just call 911 and report it. But if you don't, we will have somebody out there, we'll see it, because they're going to be out doing surveys of the area.
Thank you.
Question over here.
Yes, my question is in an age group that we're living here, and what about that problem of medications? About having a medical pack of some kind to take with you for your medications?
Good point. And there was a couple things when Adam was talking, I wrote down pets and medication. Make sure that the other thing you want to do is make sure that you have your medications. If you don't have duplicate, I don't know how the best way, maybe you have a duplicate prescription that you keep available and you kind of cycle through and make sure. The worst thing we do sometimes is we keep all our old medications, and that can be very detrimental to us. So keep the medications that you need, keep them current. If you can keep your refills up where you have extras that you can, so that you can have them in a go kit, in your car, that's probably the best place in that 72-hour kit where they're in your car, and then you just rotate them through your normal regimen of prescriptions would probably be the best way to do that. And pets, if you have pets, remember they need food, they need water, they need all the other things too, so you want to make sure that you have extra supplies for your pets.
That includes medications for the pets, too.
Yes, it does.
I have a diabetic dog, so you're not kidding. I give him insulin twice a day.
Do you guys all have copies of your important papers? You should have your prescriptions, your important papers, your doctor's name, all your information, passports. Keep it in a Ziploc bag, stick it in your freezer or your refrigerator, and then if you run out that door, you just grab it right out of the refrigerator or freezer. That's a really safe place to keep your important documents. Some people even go as far as to keep valuables in their important papers.
Because
So-
if you end up in a shelter,
Yeah.
They're going to want to know if they're going to help you with your medication. Say you go to a Red Cross shelter, they'll help you get medications, but they need to know what it is. So if you have either photos of the labels or whatever it is, those important things that you need to have, then take them with you. And when you get to that shelter, they'll be able to help you better.
Yeah, another suggestion on that is all that can be put up and updated. If you've got a computer, you can put it on a flash drive and carry it with you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Question?
First of all, I wanted to thank CERT for putting this on. Do you have a plan, does CERT have a plan with each village? And are the board of directors of each village knowledgeable about what the plan is? Because I think we're all, like you said, going to have to depend on each other. So that's a question for CERT.
No, I'm sorry, I was distracted.
Oh, you have a plan for each village?
The CERT team, we're dispersed throughout the villages. I can't tell you off the top of my head where we all are. We are broken into 3 regions, and each has a region commander, and then we have a command center that's based here in the clubhouse. If you go out towards the pool area, that last little office before you go outside is a CERT command center. They have connection to ham radios. They have connections to walkie-talkies. Most of the members here on CERT, we have a walkie-talkie that we carry with us, in fact, every week. In fact, tonight at 6 o'clock, we all do a radio check to make sure we're in communication and our radios are communicating. Within that, if there is an emergency, the command center here will let us know as CERT members, and we'll come around, and we're looking for these if we're coming around. Okay?
Maybe it'd be a good idea for each village to have a CERT liaison or something like that.
That has been part of discussion, but again, we're getting to a point that we have to talk to also the board of directors of the Homeowners Association, because there's some legal things that need to be worked out. But great question, thank you.
Just to let you all know, our next CERT Academy with the Oceanside Fire Department will be in March. It'll be probably the first couple weeks. It's a Thursday night, an all-day Saturday, and the following Thursday night and an all-day Saturday. So keep that in mind too for when you, if you're interested in joining the CERT and getting the training behind it. We have continued trainings throughout the month. One particularly almost every month. We do have our annual training this Saturday, just in a couple days, and that'll be at the Fire Training Center. So if you want to get CERT trained, March is the next time, okay?
Before I take another question, just the dance troupe here is putting on a performance in December where the proceeds go to CERT. So all that money that would come back to CERT and stay in the community. Would you like to come up and talk about that just very quickly? 29th of November.
29th of November, 3 o'clock, and we decided to have the proceeds benefit CERT. So the tickets go on sale on the 5th from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and the rest of that week and the next week.
Okay.
The show is at 3 o'clock.
Okay, that's coming up. There's a flyer that went, I think, last week or week before last, and I'm sure there'll be a blurb out on the email blast here shortly about that. But thank you very much for doing that for CERT. Question?
Question for the fire chief, police chief, fire chief.
Chief.
I don't
Fire
know.
chief, okay.
What do you want me to be?
Okay, we've all seen the commercials on TV with UPS using drones to drop packages. I'm wondering, do you have drones to peruse the areas and see where help is needed? And if through their communications CERT they need something that you could drop supplies through drones? Have you ever thought of that?
I hadn't thought about using them for bringing in supplies. I mean, it's kind of cool. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens as we get better and better technology. So
Well, it's here now. They're dropping packages on
I
your
know.
doorstep, I guess. I don't know.
And I'm going to wait and make sure they don't drop them on people, and then I'll. The city of Oceanside, through the police department, they do have some drones. We, in the fire department, we do happen to have a licensed drone pilot, and he oftentimes has his drones here, and we use them sometimes. There are drones all in the, believe it or not, SDG&E has a number of UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones, and a number of pilots. And they are available to our local resources, such as the cities, to use when we need them. So I'm sure we'll grow into that technology. Those drones cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a piece, depending on what you're going to do with them. So it's a little bit of what do I spend my money on, and how we get them. So I'm sure we'll be getting more and more into that.
I was just
market.
thinking because you might not be able to get here in an earthquake, and
Right.
that's one way. And then the other question is, you mentioned that green belts are good areas to have as a blockage too for fires.
Right.
And we have some green belts, but little by little they're getting rid of our green belts. The golf course, of course, will always be here. But should we keep some of our green belts for that reason?
Well, I don't want to get in the middle of the HOA, so oh man. I'm just, if you have them, they are good rally points. They are good evacuation points. They are good. Say you had say it wasn't even a wildland fire. Say it was just a structure fire. Say we had a house fire and it was a red flag day with a lot of wind. So yes, we could have fire move through the community, potentially. So having those evacuation points, those big open areas, are good because you're kind of protected. Now you're not protected from smoke and those kind of things. So you always want to be inside, but as a safe point of refuge, it's the same thought process we use in the fire service when our guys are out on wildland fires. They always have a place to retreat to that provides them some safe refuge. It may be hot and it may be smoky and it may be dirty, but hopefully it's big enough that they'll survive any event that comes through. So we try to operate with that mindset.
Well, I was thinking more in the way of keeping a fire from spreading too. if we
Yes,
have green belts.
any place that you don't have contiguous fire fuels it's basically a natural fire break. So I'm a big proponent of green space.
Okay, thank you. Question over here.
Yes, we live on Andros, and it's one of the streets that backs the big canyon. It's very, very, very dry back there, and there are many streets that back this canyon. And I'm just wondering if there would be a fire back there or one of the fires spread into there, are you able to get in there to fight it? I haven't ever noticed any real roads back there. And also, what should we do if we see flames or smoke? Should we leave right away, or should we wait, or what do you think?
Well, without going and looking up, but my guess is you probably have a block wall or some sort of fence that...
No, just a small cyclone fence.
Okay, but there's some open, you got a yard or something between...
A little bit.
Yeah. So I promise you, we'll get in there. We have a great way of making our own roads if one doesn't exist. So we will get in there. We also use helicopters. We have those to our pretty quick call if we need them. Depending on the location, you might see the aircraft come in. But yeah, we can get back there. We can do one of the things we do is we have a couple things that we look at. We do what we call direct attack to the fire, or we'll do structure protection, or sometimes we do them simultaneously. We'll put units in here to protect structures, and sometimes we're just not able to put the fire out. It just burns through or burns by. But we will do everything we can to put resources into the community to help with those evacuations, to protect structures, and then we have other units that go out and do the actual wildland fire attack or perimeter control.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me a moment.
Sure.
I'd like to help with that answer.
Sure.
My name's Dave Duford. I'm the Community Patrol Director, and I'm responsible for Ocean Hills Country Club community. We have 17 officers, 24/7.
Perfect.
If there's a situation like that, where if there's a fire that's identified in an area, we would like you to call 911, as well as call the front gate if you can. We always have our officers monitoring. We'll relay that information and a concise direction point of where it is, and we'll help relay that information over to the CERT team. During the Lilac fire, it was an amazing, many, many years in the business. I've never seen anything like it. There was at least 9 nurses, 9 different stations within the community that had mobilized, set up command. We had complete communication at all times with them to be able to ascertain where we were at in case there was an evacuation. So we'll serve as a volunteer at that point to help out and make sure that we are interrelaying the message. We're boots on the ground as well, and we're going to do everything we can to help that communication, because the worst thing is if we can't bridge that gap of communication together. So if you have any questions about our role and what we do and anything that you're not able to get answered here, I'm always available to you. Okay?
Thank you, and that's it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Yes, applaud. And that's the other thing that makes your community so good, is that you have trained individuals that are vested in your security and safety all the time, 24/7, right? There's somebody here?
Yes.
Yes, sir, 24/7, including Christmas.
Just like us. So that's the other thing that sets you apart from some of our other communities in the city, is that you have all these things working in your favor. And so when you have these unusual events happen, where just get the information to them and they'll know what to do and how to get us to the right place at the right time.
Okay, I'll take 4 more questions. We got 4 people in line, so question.
I just had a question. You're kind of already touching upon it in some ways here, but some of these homes in this village were built 35 years ago. I don't know if you'd call it stucco or wood frame with drywall on the outside, and we have tile roofs. And I was just wondering, and many of our homes are 2 homes in one structure with a dividing wall. Do we have any advantage to having the tile roofs positioned where our village is from wildfire around it, or disadvantage or advantage with the way our homes were built here?
It's huge. So your homes were built about the same time I was. When I moved into our neighborhood, every home had a wood shake roof. My family was very tuned in to, if there's a fire in the area, even if it's a half mile away, I want them to leave. The reason was because wood shake roofs were the #1 reason that we had fires in communities, because even a small spark would get into the wood shake and an hour later you'd have a fire start, even when you thought the fire was out. We are now almost all, and it was one of the best things the state ever did when it came to roofs. We all now have tile roofs. There's a few left that are shake, but they'll eventually replace their roofs, and they can't do it. So yes, it's a huge advantage having that type of roof. Your construction is like many of the homes. It's wood frame, stuccoed. The big issue that you have to watch for, if you have say you live by where the wildland interface is, and you start getting ash falling, and so keep an eye on your ornamental vegetation that we have out front. A lot of times that's dry and it's kind of receptive to catching ash, and sometimes they'll catch fire. Also, you want to, if you have vents that are open, you want to make sure that they are well screened with a tight screen mesh is helpful if that hasn't been changed out. A lot of homes, they've done that because they know about it, but when they built our homes originally, it had a different kind of screening or mesh, and it did allow for a lot of sparks to get in there. So that's the other thing that happens. They get up in the attic, sparks get up in the attic, and you have to be aware of that. But other than that, your construction is pretty normal.
So hopefully it wouldn't happen here what happened in the mobile home park. Is that the Lilac file?
Right. Well, again, those are mobile homes, and it doesn't take much to take a mobile home out of. It's very rare that, and so when you get a wind-driven fire that's pushing that type of heat through they just go. They're just like matches. So,
question over here.
I actually have one comment and one question. The comment is that there are several CERT members of our group here that are RV members. Some time ago, many years ago, the officers of the RV club requested that all of the RV owners keep their tanks, water tanks, full in case of an emergency. And I hope that they're still doing that.
I will comment, I'm a member of the RV club, and I also have an RV, and it is under discussion that not only will we keep them full and ready, but some of us have volunteered to utilize our RVs and pull them out of the lot and position them accordingly, because we have water, we have generators, we have bedding, we're ready to go to help. So the RV club is discussing it. I can't speak that everybody's going to do it, but yes, we're very aware that we're a unsung resource.
So become friends with somebody with an RV.
My question is about fire extinguishers. How many should you have in your home? What locations? And how do you know when it's time to replace them or replace the charge?
Okay, ladies, this one's for you. Yes, you should have 2 in a home, 1 in the garage, 1 underneath your kitchen sink. And how do you know when it's still alive? Usually a fire extinguisher will last you anywhere from 12 to 15 years. You can stretch the length of the time that it's going to still work by turning it upside down and giving it a good shake. And, you know, depending on which one you have, sometimes they can be a little intimidating for women. So have a man or a next door neighbor go and give it a good shake. And then always make sure that the gauge is on the green, okay? So the good places to have them, just 2 in each home. And everybody, by the way, do you all have your smoke alarms, all with the new 10-year batteries and so forth in them? Have you changed your carbon monoxide detectors? Because if you put those in about 7 years ago, it's time to replace them now, because they only last about 7 to 8 years. So if it's starting to make a noise, please don't disconnect it. Get a new one. Put it in its place. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question.
Yes, thank you. For those of us who store bottled water, how long does a gallon of water generally last?
I like that question.
Thank you.
So water is, once again, the most important thing, but it's such a complicated thing that usually when I talk about water, I do a whole 45-minute to an hour presentation just on water and all the parts that go with it. The answer to your bottled water situation is multiple parts. Number one is the water in there is good from 2 years from the date that that bottle was made, not when it was filled up, but when the bottle itself was made. So by the time it's made, sits in their warehouse, goes to another fulfillment warehouse, gets filled, goes to a fulfillment warehouse, goes to Vaughn's, and then you get it, usually you have between 6 months to a year that bottle is good before the plastic in it starts leaching the petroleums and all the other chemicals in there. Now, they don't tell you that, they just say 2 years, so it's a little misleading once again, like I said on other things. But the other parts of that, and my biggest pet peeve, if you're storing that in heat and in sunlight in particular, that time goes down significantly. So when you go to Vaughn's and they have their big sale for $1 for 24 and it's sitting in the front in the sun, that water is getting worse by the minute. And then if you store it in some place that has heat, like a trunk of your car or a hot garage, that's not good for it either. My personal preference is I don't let it go longer than 6 months. I feel okay with that. You can let it go up to a year, but after that, I'd water your plants with it and not drink it.
Can you refill an old bottle?
The problem is that yes, you can refill it, but the plastic itself is already starting to go bad. The plastic that you buy the bottles at the grocery store is made to break down as quickly as possible because they know it's going to go into a landfill. So they want it to break down as fast as possible, which means it's going to be leaching chemicals into your stuff. And that's the reason why since the 1990s, we've had a huge uptake in plastic poisoning and a lot of cancer cases because those particulates are getting into your bloodstream and your cells, and they're not, your body just doesn't know what to do with it. Before that, everyone was drinking from cans and from glass bottles which is much better long term. So you really want to, you don't want to go more than a year. If you know it's been stored in sunlight and in heat, you want to, take that down a little bit. Like I said, my personal rule of thumb is 6 months, but you make that decision for yourself.
Thank you.
And I'll just say this about water, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that beer and wine is mostly water, so I don't know if that's...
We wouldn't know anything about that here in Ocean Hills.
I know there's no more questions, but I wanted to close with one thing, is there are a number of resources available that can answer your questions and help you. The County of San Diego, through the Office of Emergency Services, I just printed this off yesterday. It's several pages. It's about having a plan. As Linda wanted me to tell you, you are the help until help arrives, and everyone should have a plan. Well, how do you develop a plan? Go to our website. Linda has she'll give you her card. I'll give you my card. Call us. We'll help you. We'll get you the information. The County of San Diego spends thousands and thousands of dollars of your tax money on preparedness. Take advantage of it. Get a hold of them. Not that Adam would ever use this, but they even have lists of things that you should have.
Good rules of thumb.
Right. But call him. Okay, that's all I was going to ask.
So I also want to remind everybody that CERT does have a website here for Ocean Hills, and on that website are a lot of these suggestions and guidelines and other information that you could go in and download now for free. So don't forget about your own CERT group here. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We had over 200 people come today. That is truly outstanding. As I said, this is going to be a series. Our next presentation is going to be on February 1st, and the topic is 911 and you. We're going to have a dispatcher here. We're going to have some first responders here to talk to you in real-life situations, how 911 is utilized, what is an emergency call from a non-emergency call, and I hope you will pass the word in saying this is going to be a really great thing, these quarterly sessions. Thank you all for coming.